Good afternoon and welcome back to My Harlem Portraits, the show that aims at shedding a light on the fundamental contribution of African Americans to the building of this country and on Black excellence. Talking about Black excellence in Harlem, Manhattan, and for this country, we could not mention this family, this person who is our guest today, Miss Keisha Sutton-James, who is Harlem-born, raised, and resident, and she is the Deputy Borough President under Manhattan Borough President Mark Levine. Welcome to My Harlem Portrait.
Thank you so much for having me. What an awesome introduction. Thank you for having me today.
Hey, your family has made history in Harlem, is the history of Harlem. I would like to mention for those of my viewers who don't know, who don't remember, that Percy Ellis Sutton, your dad, was the highest ranking African-American elected official in New York City when he was a Manhattan Borough President. And he was
actually the highest ranking in the state.
In the state, see?
Yes.
When you go to Wikipedia, they don't tell you that. and he was Manhattan Borough President from 1966 to 77, which is the longest tenure at that position. Then he became an entrepreneur. He's invested in pillars of this community like New York Amsterdam News and the Apollo Theater. Okay, the Apollo Theater. And he was a civil rights movement activist, a lawyer, a freedom rider, and he was Malcolm X lawyer. Malcolm X was my hero. So I'm talking to history. So let's come to you now that we have clearly situated you in where you came from and what brought you to what you are doing today. As deputy, you are focusing on community affairs, constituent services, appointments, public safety, and criminal justice. These are all very crucial and very demanding tasks. So tell us, how is a day in the life of a deputy?
It's so funny that you asked that, because I have a young man who's shadowing me today, a high school student who is shadowing me to experience a day in the life of the deputy. It's a program that I am rolling out. It's kind of a soft launch. I've been reaching out to different organizations and not-for-profits to ask that they send somebody to spend the day with me. A day in the life of the deputy is can be all over the place, all different types of things. Today, I did one of the things that I've been working on pretty heavily that's not in my bio actually, is the rollout of cannabis, the cannabis industry here in Manhattan in particular. It's rolling out in New York State as a whole, but my focus is obviously here in Manhattan. So this morning I met and Luke joined me. He just ran out to get some lunch because I let them eat, of course. But I had a meeting this morning with the founding I forgot what exactly her title is, Dashida Dawson is the founding head of Cannabis NYC, which is the New York City kind of effort that's focused within small business services, focused on the cannabis industry here in New York City. Mm-hmm. So I had a meeting with her. I had a meeting with a local anti-domestic violence organization, because I became aware of a real estate that someone is looking to fill and she's looking to move. So I put the two of them together. I get to be interviewed with such an awesome intro as this. There's management duties that I had earlier in the day. I'll have a press conference later on today, I believe. Yes, later on today. So it's a day in the life is all over the place. I may be in the northern part of the island, I may be in the southern, I may be on Roosevelt Island, I may be, it depends on the day. It really does change every single day. And that's part of what I love about it, is that I get to touch and experience different elements of Manhattan life, as well as figure out how I can have the greatest impact on this island every single day.
Sorry. So you just said two things that you said now that are very interesting to develop. The cannabis situation, because as we know, it's mostly African Americans and Black and brown people who have been impacted by prison sentences just for having some cannabis. And so they need to have those prison sentences sponged from their records. Yes. And also it's good that there are some stores in our communities so that African Americans can be also gaining from that. So that's interesting to talk about. And also, what is the press conference today? So we have a avant premiere of it.
So the cannabis work is like multi-pronged. New York State is working to become the leader in social equity with regard to cannabis, so that as you pointed out, Black and brown people, especially downstate, what we call downstate, meaning New York State is a big state that goes up. And the southern part of it is where New York City is. The southernmost part is where New York City is. And Black and brown people in New York City have been the most impacted in all of New York State. And by arrests and harassment, and let's not forget that an arrest doesn't just impact that one individual, it impacts their children, their spouses, their partners, their grandparents, and so forth and so on. So when when one person is being sent upstate, because all the prisons are upstate, when one person is being sent upstate for a minor crime that, in many other countries would have been considered not even a crime, not to mention maybe a misdemeanor, you're impacting an entire family and community when it's as widespread as it has been for Black and brown people in New York City. So, and New York and around the country, frankly. So what New York State is working to do is to essentially repair some of that harm. So that means prioritizing people who have been impacted and communities who have been impacted by what's called marijuana prohibition. And in terms of getting licenses so that they can become licensed dispensary owners or licensed in other ways in the business. So that's one way that they're looking to level or to repair some of the harm. Another is that 40% of the revenues from the cannabis business here in New York State are to be reinvested back into community. And so my focus in that regard is to ensure that the dollars that are supposed to come into these Black and brown communities are actually coming into Black and brown communities in Manhattan. And so Harlem, Washington Heights, East Harlem, the Lower East Side, which also has the highest concentration of NYCHA developments. NYCHA is the New York City Housing Authority, the public housing authority. And so, everything is always well-intentioned, but the devil is always in the details. And it's devil's in the details, and it's implementation that's so key. So part of what I've been doing in the cannabis space is doing we did a number of outreach events to educate community about the opportunity to get licenses. And now we're doing work to help enable community to access opportunities in workforce development, because that's another, you don't have to own a dispensary in order to be able to make money and have a real career in this business. They are actually the jobs in the cannabis industry, but the dispensaries are required by law to have to have an agreement, or excuse me, to not essentially not be unfriendly with labor unions. So it is, so not only will they be good paying jobs, but you ought to be able to unionize, and they ought to be well protected jobs as well. So there's a workforce development opportunity that's developing there as well. So there's also, frankly, a lot of education that needs to be done about the benefits of medical marijuana, because there's so many communities that don't appreciate that, still think that cannabis is a gateway drug, still, think that cannabis use is bad, and also legalization is bad. I will say, I think legalization is really positive for a few reasons. One, you've got the revenue that's coming in, and that will be reinvested into community, again, 40% of it. Two is there's so many protections. These days kids are buying marijuana products that they think are marijuana products off the street in these pop-up dispensaries that are not actually licensed dispensaries. They don't know what is in them. And I've been hearing horror stories about what's in them.
Yeah.
The packaging is designed to appeal to children. It doesn't label the regulated cannabis, will label the THC content, will label the, so that people are able to understand what they're consuming. That's the benefit of having a regulated, legalized industry. There are a number of other benefits, but I think it's,
you take the money away from the mafia and from the illegal.
And that as well. And that's another important, so along with enforcement, like, it's a really delicate balance right now, because what we don't want is for this to what is the word? I'm blanking on the word, but to re-penalize, if you will, the same people. At the same time, we need that revenue to come back and to be funneled into the city's, community-based organizations that are serving youth, and they're serving, any number of issues, drug treatment centers, et cetera, et cetera. So it's everyone's being very thoughtful about how to approach enforcement, but enforcement is necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. Next, prior to serving in the Levine administration, you served as campaign manager for Alvin Bragg, for Manhattan District Attorney. He was successful, and his historical win in 2022 made him be the first Black district attorney for New York County. This is big. And
very big.
Of course, he got a lot of problems and a lot of criticism because of this. And tell us about the meaning of this victory, and take us inside the events that are currently unfolding, the Trump indictment by the grand jury, the threats to Bragg and his family. I mean, all this, the fact that the Congress asked Bragg to come and tell them what the inquiry is about. I mean, things that has never been done before. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so inside the victory itself, it was a huge deal. The Manhattan District Attorney is the most powerful and highly respected local prosecutor in the country. If you all are familiar with the show Law and Order, it is the show that the entire Law and Order franchise was based on. It's Manhattan is different in a number of ways. Obviously, there's such a huge corporate presence on the island of Manhattan. There is Wall Street here as well, so there's an ability to bring cases against financial entities as well. It's an incredibly diverse island. Manhattan is it's a whole different ballgame than most other prosecutorial offices in the country. And that office had never been occupied by anyone who was not white and male. And the last several DAs had been the offspring of former U.S. cabinet members. So the creamiest of the cream of the crop in terms of elite New Yorkers were, their children were the people who occupied that incredibly powerful seat to determine whether or not to, I think of this power as a solemn one, and I know that the DA does as well, and that's considering how you exercise those powers to bring a case against someone, and ultimately to remove their freedom.
Yes. That's
a very big deal. Needless to say, I, as a Black woman, really appreciate, how grave and it's immense a power that is. When I say I as a Black woman, I say I as a descendant of formerly enslaved Americans, African Americans. That's the perspective I'm coming from. But there's also the perspective of the impact of the criminal justice system on Black people in America, the mass incarceration of us over the last several decades. So it's a very serious and solemn power. It's a very big deal. And I could not have been prouder to have been part of that moment. It is without question one of the, it's definitely, probably one of my biggest professional achievements. And it meant so much to me. My grandfather was very close and a huge part of Mayor Dinkins's run to become the first Black New York City mayor. My grandfather was also the first Black person to run for mayor of New York City in '77 when he left the borough president's office. It sits well in my soul in terms of me and my kind of legacy in my family. I'm very proud. What the DA has been going through since he's been in office, and in particular the last few weeks, is incredibly, it's saddening and disappointing. I'll lift up a couple of things. I happen to have known him for 30 years, so I know him as I know the character of the man. I also, because I was his campaign manager, I know what he did and didn't do, what he did and didn't run on. He never said he was going to prosecute Trump, not once. That's just not how he approaches the practice. No real prosecutor would approach that power in that way. You have to follow the evidence and let the evidence guide you to whatever decision you have to make, whether or not to prosecute and which charges to bring. I'm not a lawyer, but I know that much. He never did that. He came under heavy criticism last year, because he was not moving forward with a particular case because it was not solid enough. The story that was out there in the media was that he was ending the Trump investigation, and that they either called him a coward or a traitor. They said he was, what do they say? They say he was corrupt. He's either a coward or corrupt, which, even though there's even though there's zero evidence to support that, this is what Twitter does. And he's kept his nose down and kept working at it, and directed his team to look at it in different ways. And now he felt comfortable, apparently, to bring an indictment, and did so. And now he's catching the heat, and actually he's still even catching heat on the Democratic side, saying that this wasn't the right case to bring. What people need to understand is prosecutors do not determine what case to bring based on how that's going to impact the political landscape. This was the case that he had evidence for, and so that's what he brings the case on. He's not thinking, at least I know he's not, I know him. He's not, and a good prosecutor is not going to think, oh, well, how's this going to impact the Democrats or the Republicans in the next election? That's not what he's there for.
Not only, he wasn't the one who started it. It was started by the DA before him.
The predecessor, who spent at least a year, I want to say, trying to get the financial records to bring these cases, and then he, left it with Alvin Bragg. So now you have Trump calling, you know, him everything but a child of God, talking about his wife and his family. And it's, you know, it's an incredibly ugly moment for our country. You know, you have him now calling, I saw yesterday he was calling for the defund the FBI and the Department of Justice. He said that the DA is, you know, is an instrument, or I forgot what he said. He's the
political instrument or something like that.
Yes, political instrument. Well, but of the Department of Justice. What he doesn't understand is he's a completely separate. He's elected, an elected official. He's not part of the Justice Department. He's not appointed by the Justice Department. He doesn't even understand local government. He doesn't understand this, like, governmental structure to you know, to appreciate that he's not what he said he is. And
the former inhabitant of the White House doesn't even understand. Let's make it clear, okay? Okay.
Right. And so, you know, he and his family and the district attorney's office and other entities have been under a lot of protection because of, you know, Trump's calls for death and destruction. He said those words, death and destruction, if he were to be indicted. He said, that's what he said, if he were to be indicted, it would be death and destruction. And also because presumably, I'm not in law enforcement, but presumably they are doing this because of what we saw with January 6th. So I'll be frank and say I've lost a lot of sleep in the last week because it's a really nerve-wracking time. I'm not working with him, but you know, he's still a friend of 30 years, and I, you know, care.
He's a child of Harlem. He's a born and raised Harlem.
Absolutely, child of Harlem, grew up in Abyssinian Baptist Church. His first experiences with the criminal justice experience, the first one was he's 15 years old, and he was stopped by police and patted down at gunpoint at 15 years old on the corner, half a block from his house, going to the corner store to buy milk and bread for his dad, that his dad asked him to go get. And that is not, sadly, is not unusual. Sadly, he had 6 experiences with guns, three at the hands of law enforcement, and 3 at the hands of people who were engaged in criminal activities. Yet he's, you know, kind of kept his focus on what he wanted to do. He's really, really a special, and frankly was able to find his way to this position without being a part of the churning of those cases that we were talking earlier, where Black and brown people were being, because he didn't go into the local prosecutor's office. He went into federal prosecutor's office, which doesn't really do those cases, So he's a pretty special guy.
Yeah.
Keep him in his prayers.
And let's pray and hope that everything goes right, because this is really ridiculous what's been happening. Your most important, or those that you're gonna focus mostly in the next, in the coming month, let's say, in your position as deputy?
Well, the next month, it will be really focused on community board appointments. Our office, the Borough President's office, is chartered with the responsibility to execute all of the appointments to the community boards. Community boards are unique to New York City. It's a very grassroots form of government. In Manhattan, there are 12 community boards, each of which is made up of 50 regular citizens who either live, work, or have some interest in that particular catchment area. Half of the appointments are nominated by our council members. The other half are nominated by our office. All are appointed by us. It's a very heavy lift. We received over 900 applications.
Wow.
Yes, and we have hundreds of appointments to make. So we have to read all of those applications. Our office has to read all those applications And then we conduct interviews online with most of those people, and then go through the whole process. And our goal has always been, and is also part of the charter, to create a diverse community board that really reflects the community. That's partly the outreach. So we were really intent, and it was very intense. The outreach portion of it to make sure that we were getting to people who are who are underrepresented on the board. So, and the two biggest areas that are underrepresented are youth, because you can be 16 years or older to serve on the community board, and NYCHA residents. So we did a lot of outreach with youth and NYCHA residents across the island. So now we've got to get through all these applications and get these appointments done in the next month. But in addition to that, there is a lot of work that to be done in the coming months in the cannabis space. We launched an internal NYCHA task force to really better work across the different teams in the office that I'm heading up, to better work across the different teams in the office to better serve NYCHA residents. So there will be more coming out in the coming months about some of the things that we're working on there. We're heading into summer season, which is 1,000,001 events that we'll be attending and helping to coordinate and organize. It's the list goes on and on and on. Summer is an intense time in the Manhattan Borough President's office, but it's an exciting time.
And you kept an office in Harlem too.
Yes, so we have two offices, one downtown in the David N. Dinkins Municipal Building, which is where I am right now, and the other on 125th Street. The staff that is located uptown is exclusively focused on constituent services, but they rotate through this office as well. So we always have a constituent service presence here. Well, not always, not on Fridays, but so that we have a constituent service presence here and uptown, so that we're managing to touch constituents all over the island as best we can. We're also working on doing a lot more kind of external facing events for constituents. So programming that will be out in the community, different kinds of workshops and et cetera. We did one last month. We're basically building a schedule of programming. We're building it now to be able to do things like legal counseling. We're working on getting our staff certified so that they'll be able to sign people up for New York State of Health to help people sign up for health insurance, for our office to be able to do that rather than referring it to somebody else. So we're building a lot of things. We got through that first year. It was a really intense first year. Now we're like reflecting and figuring out what we're going to build in the Manhattan Borough President's office going forward. And so we're definitely in building mode right now on a lot of fronts.
And do you have any time for your family?
So my daughter's applying to college and has gotten into a bunch of colleges. And I have two daughters. One is going to college next year, another one who's 13. They are the love of my life, the loves of my life, as well as my husband and my puppy, he's actually barely a puppy at this point. He's almost 2 years old. No, he's 1.5 years. August is my baby boy's name. I birthed 2 girls, and now I have a baby boy, and that's my puppy. Yeah. But no, it's hard. Families is a struggle. I get to see my nuclear family. I don't get to see my parents enough. I need to work on that. My brother and sister, I don't get to see enough. But I have been also laser focused right now on my daughter's my daughter's college applications and getting her set up, on the right path and hopefully, as debt free as possible. And so soon come. She's got a lot of amazing acceptances now. We're approaching decision-making time. So
what does she want to do? She knows what she wants.
She says she wants to major in political science, no surprise.
Yes.
Maybe a minor in journalism. She wants to do pre-law, so she thinks she wants to work in the criminal justice or criminal justice reform space.
Mhm.
So, but you know, she's young. We'll see. I know I went to college, studied international relations. My goal was to become the first female Secretary of State and to free Nelson Mandela because he was still imprisoned at that point. Both of which happened before I graduated from college. So that changed everything for me. I was like, what do I do now?
I got free. It's free.
Yeah, I mean, and Madeleine Albright came and, you know, with Bill
Yes.
Clinton, and so, you know, they just shattered all my dreams. But the point is that, like, she's young, she's 17, she's about to be 18 in June, and you know, this is a new career for me, frankly. I just started in politics 3 years ago. So, and I'm 50 at this point. So, you know, we are all entitled to, and I'm sure she will have, you know, a multifaceted and beautiful career and pathway ahead of her. I just, you know, want to help guide the initial steps so that she comes out without debt and able to go into a job that's fulfilling and has a pathway for her if she wants it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for this very, very interesting conversation. Thank you for finding the time in your tight agenda to fit my Harlem Portraits in, and our viewers, they will be very, very happy.
I cannot wait to come back. Thank you so much for having me here today. It is my honor, my pleasure. I'm sorry it took a while to get this scheduled, but I'm thrilled that we did. And one day you'll have to have me over at your place so I can see all of your gorgeous artwork.
Oh,
I love it. I have this picture of Muhammad Ali and all kinds of great stuff going on back there. I need to step up my office artwork game. I'll get on that.
You are invited whenever you want.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to our viewers. See you next time, 12:30, Saturday, 12:30. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.